My name is Chad Etzel. I'm the host of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm also a trained and certified leadership coach, and my goal is to help you overcome stress and master your time, your money, and your God-inspired future. Now, typically this podcast is about leadership coaching, but I've been encouraged by a number of my friends, a number of the people that I've talked to apply these leadership coaching principles into our personal lives. And specifically with this new series, I'm calling it Catholic, Single, and Flourishing. The goal of the series is to help you as Catholic singles live your God-inspired calling, your vocation today, but also pave a path for the future. So feel free to check out this episode, check out the description in the show notes below, look for the links for the new podcasts and ways that you can connect with me, and also check out a free resource. It's an ebook that I wrote about helping Catholic singles break the cycle of pressure and inaction. With that, here we go with the episode. Well, everybody, welcome back. I am so excited to have our next guest join us here. His name is Dr. Greg Bottaro. And Dr. Greg, he's certainly been a personal mentor of mine over the years. I first encountered him during my time with the Culture Project, and he came in and did a number of trainings for us in the areas of psychology, in the areas of community life, and then also overcoming anxiety. Dr. Greg is the founder of Catholic Psych Institute. He's also host of one of my favorite podcasts, Being Human. So we'll leave a link to the show notes for you to check that one out. He's also a clinical psychologist, and he helps people in their mental wellness through both sound psychology and also Catholic Christian anthropology. And today we're going to be discussing how to flourish as a Catholic single around the holidays, because that's definitely a time where we can experience a lot of longing. And then he will be sharing a little bit about how his new mentorship program can help us in a couple of different ways. Dr. Greg, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here with you. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just broadly speaking, tell us a little bit about the mission of Catholic Psych and some of the things that you saw were lacking in the world of psychology when you founded the program and then developed the organization over the years.
Sure. Yeah. So our mission is to create a standard for mental health. It's something that's severely lacking. There's no actual standard. And that means that there's no foundation or basis against which to judge any other form of treatment or program or training or anything else in the world of mental health, which is why it's such a mess. The world of mental health is obviously, take a look around, and the world is upside down. And it's not just a political issue, it's not just an economic issue, but it's really at the deepest level a misunderstanding of a definition of what it is to be human, which is why we named the podcast Being Human, because it really kind of carries most of our mission there within the podcast. But I started practicing. I went through all the normal training and protocols. I got a doctorate, the terminal degree, and busted my butt in hours and money, and spent all sorts of resources in getting to a place to have this accreditation, this recognition, this license, and all these things. And then you start practicing and you realize that we are not trained in any kind of adequate way to actually help people on the most fundamental important things in their life. And it makes sense, because if there's no definition of what it is to be human, then how could you possibly know what it means to be a broken human, or to know how to fix what's broken in our brokenness? And so the field at large misses the most important, deepest anthropological foundation, and that the philosophy of what it is to be human. So that's what we've set out to offer, to provide, to fill the gap. And there's a lot of room for improvement. It's a new endeavor, and we're hoping to at least make a proposal for what we think it is to be human, what it means to be broken, what it means to be healed, and what our ultimate purpose is. And hopefully it catches on, that people see that this is really important and start to bring together the psychological expertise with the spiritual dimension of our faith and an anthropological, philosophical foundation for what it is to be human.
Yeah, for sure. That's so important. And over the time of the last decade that I've been being formed in these different areas, it's become more and more clear that having that Catholic Christian anthropology as a backbone, as a direction, really knowing who are we as human beings? What is our story and where are we supposed to be going? And that's what's missing a lot in the secular world, that with the secular world, oftentimes it's just be who you are or be who you want, whoever you want to be. But really that doesn't give us a lot of vision or direction to be able to move towards.
Yeah, exactly. Without direction, and it's like you're actually putting your finger on something that is implicitly one of the biggest problems from the secular field in the first place, is that they don't believe in a teleology.
Yep.
They don't believe in the final end or the purpose or the direction. It's really backwards. But the science of psychology will actually deny the need for understanding purpose and end and finality. And because that's supposedly the pure scientific form where you're just making observable, connecting observable data points. And so, talking about telos is a philosophy. That's not that's not the science. And so, that's part of our postmodern relativism, that we think science is enough and that science is the highest good, and that's what needs to be healed.
Yep. And within that, it's like, how can you have hope if you don't have a direction for the future? And that's certainly one of the challenges that I think our secular world throws out. It's initially appealing, where it's you can be whoever you want to be, but if there's no vision or no brighter future that's given to us, then it can lead to a lot of this messiness that you're sharing about, where we just don't know that the future can be brighter. So getting into our audience and our topic today, this podcast series that I'm conducting, it's about helping Catholic singles flourish today, but also prepare a pathway for the future. And I speak from my own experience, and I also speak from what I've observed as a coach. And you have this perspective of being a clinical psychologist. And so I wanted to ask, from your own perspective as a clinical psychologist, what have you observed as some of the main pain points for Catholic singles who they want to move towards their vocation, whether it's marriage or just having more clarity in what it means to be a healthy single, Catholic single, Christian single? What are those main pain points?
Well, I think the main pain points are loneliness and not feeling adequate, feeling like they're doing something wrong, a lot of self-blame and self-criticism. Ultimately, sometimes that loneliness leading to self-centeredness and maybe, making poor decisions of sort of making oneself feel more comfortable in that state of loneliness. And so, sometimes I think people find unhealthy outlets for that sort of immediate gratification and trying to meet the needs that they have, and not really ever doing the deep work, getting to that deep work of how to actually get those needs met. So I think it's a huge opportunity. It's one of the best. First of all, I love the topic of this series. I think it's awesome, and I think it's sorely needed in our culture, in our Catholic culture, and amongst single people, because there, rightly so, is so much emphasis on a beautiful, the flourishing of vocation and the full gift of self and marriage and theology of the body and, all these things. It's like amazing. It's a beautiful vocation. We want to have lots of kids and we want to, get each other to heaven and all this stuff, which happens to coincide with all of the desire that is fueled by our hormones and brain development through adolescence into young adulthood.
And not to mention Disney movies, right?
Well, I mean, not just Disney movies. Well, yeah, Disney movies don't make it any better.
adding into the whole desire part.
Yeah, they definitely know how to tap into those desires. But rightly so, the desires are there, and rightly, I mean, this is how God made us. So, like I said, it's all rightly so. And yet, at the same time, it's opened up a need for deepening a sense of understanding of where that step is in the journey, where someone has not yet opened up and been introduced to that person or that step of their vocation. So, what I think is really, it marks the time of singlehood, that it's a deep call, it's a unique and once in a lifetime call to deepen one's intimacy with the Lord. And the pain point that I see is people not being fed in the support to do that and to understand that that's actually their vocation at the moment, and not being educated and directed in that way. So it's like so much about, oh, let's do this retreat, let's do this young adult event, let's do this thing so that, young adults have a chance to meet each other, and let's sort of point everything in that direction of bringing people together. But like in the meantime, then all the people that haven't met somebody yet are left out in the cold. It's like, what are they supposed to do?
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the needs that I saw with this particular series, because it's as you mentioned, there's all those young adult events. So there's a lot of things to do, but even those events don't necessarily speak to our hearts and our situations in this day and age. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to really address this and be able to speak to where people are right now. So as for today's topic, it's about being Catholic and single around the holidays, with this episode coming out around Christmas. This is often a time of longing, since a lot of us spend time during Christmas around our family of origin, for instance. And then we look at social media and we see all the pictures that our friends post with their families, their happy little, families with their kids and everything. And then again, I joke about the Disney movies, but a lot of these nostalgic Christmas movies, they're very family centric. And I think that can stir within our hearts that sort of longing and that sort of desire, which is a real natural desire, as we're talking about here. And so what have you found helpful for Catholic singles to really be present and to embrace these moments, and to just, instead of just tolerating our singleness, but really embrace the present time?
Well, again, I think it has to do with this reorientation and re-education, and the most practical thing, and it doesn't sound very practical, but it is the most practical thing, is prayer.
Yeah.
And education. So like really learning how to see one's own place in the world right now. And so comparing oneself to everybody else is a waste of time. And unless it means to learn something that's going to help me where I am. And, I've done a video series in the past. I'm trying to remember where it even is right now. But and I remember in the past doing something with the benefits of community between single people and married people. And I promote this where, every married couple should have a single friend in their life. And it's kind of counterintuitive. Like, and we have people in our life that are single, and sometimes it's a little more difficult. It's like people are surprised sometimes, like friendship takes work. And sometimes it's not just easy and convenient. The low-hanging fruit of friendship is like, who else do you hang out with at all the singles events? Even same-sex friends. And who are the other parents of your kids in school? And it's like, okay, that's fine, that's easy, but like, is it intentional, and is it disciplined, and is it worth something that requires work? And so a friendship between single people and married people offers a beautiful opportunity for a mutual co-education, where you have single people seeing the fruit of married love and knowing what that looks like in flesh, in real people, and sort of what all of us are made for, ultimately in a spiritual level and divine relationship, and that married life and the family is a sign of that love. And it's beautiful to be around the sign. It's good to see signs. And yet at the same time, it's really important for single people who are living out the with purity and authenticity, the place where they're at in their vocation. You have so much time to devote to your intimacy with God and your prayer life, your relationship with God, spiritual reading, prayer practices, works of mercy, all these kinds of things where you're developing your own self and doing that sort of co-creation of one's own life with self-determination. And that's when you have so much time to focus on oneself. And so we have a single friend, one in particular I'm thinking about right now, and it's like anytime we're hanging out with him, his work for the poor, his work for prayer, establishing ministry, devoting himself to adoration, like all these things. It's like an awesome renewal when we get to spend time with him. And he's like, it's so life-giving to be around you guys and your kids and your life and your family and all this stuff. So beautiful. It's like this awesome coeducation. So practical is to spend the time to pray and prepare with education to be in those scenarios where you're in a different place from the people that you're with, and to appreciate the differences, and not to be thinking like I need to be more like them, or I can't wait to be where they are, or I'm so lonely and I'm so sad because I'm not where they are, but instead a deep appreciation for where I am. And so I think that's the best and the healthiest way to handle it, is when you can actually say, is there a suffering involved where I am? Absolutely. The loneliness is real. And that's an actual suffering. And you're not going to avoid that, and we shouldn't. Is there a suffering in having a family life? Absolutely, there is. So when my friend comes and he's telling me about like he can go to adoration and go to masses whenever he feels like and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh man, but long gone are those days when I had that kind of freedom in my schedule to just do whatever I felt like I wanted to do even in my own prayer life. So there's a suffering in that. So, but when we can appreciate and we're drawing into that prayer to have that gratitude and appreciation for where we're at in our life, we can actually be really blessed and nurtured by these experiences with other people.
That's really profound, just kind of hearing you lay out some of those things. And I think about just recently a couple of times where I've gotten a chance to spend some time with some married couples who have several children, and just how life-giving that is for me as a single person to observe that and see that and just enjoy that. It's a real privilege then as a single person in terms of personal development, as you're mentioning. There's all that time, and that time to be able to do this. And you're touching on something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, because I've been doing some research and sitting down with singles, asking them questions. And I don't think that this is specific to Catholic singles or those who feel that they're perpetually single. I think this is a very common American thing. And I'm talking specifically about myopia, just being so narrow focused in on your own world. So just as what you're mentioning with being single, for instance, it's, yes, there are legitimate longings and desires to be married. There's that loneliness there, and that's a legitimate feeling in our situation. But sometimes we always get this grass is greener perspective, right? In terms of thinking about, oh, my life being married, or all those people, that comparison there.
Yeah, absolutely. And in stepping outside of oneself and seeing the bigger picture is part of the training that is really important for being single. It's like that's thinking about just another vocation or another sort of way of life is not as far of a reach as the kind of laying down of one's own perspective that's required in marriage when the other is actually another gender. So you have to go outside of not your vocation, but your sex to understand the way that another person lives in this world so foreign to you. There's no way to overstate how foreign the opposite sex is in terms of their experience of life. And so the married vocation is an apprenticeship of working through laying down one's life, stepping outside of oneself into the world of a person who's radically different from you, and the way that your brain is made, and the way that your hormones work, and the way that your perception is formed by those things, spiritually and physically and psychologically, so different. The difference between a single person and a married person is not even close to the difference between a man and a woman. So, a single man sitting down and talking to a married man has more in common than a man talking to a woman. any state of life. So that if you're single and it's like, gee, this is really hard to like see past my own state right now and the way I'm experiencing Christmas versus the way that my buddy's experiencing Christmas. And maybe it's the same sex buddy and he's married and, and then he's got his challenges and you've got yours, but like step outside of yourself, like appreciate the things that are easier, the things that are more difficult, the things that are blessings. Everything's a blessing, but the things that are challenges and the things that are, consolations, and appreciate it for the other person. And then that shines a different light on your own state. And we realize like, actually I have a lot of consolations where my buddy has desolations or difficulties. And maybe I have difficulties where he has, comfort and consolation. Stepping out of oneself is precisely how we can benefit from the time of being single. And you have like no other person that you actually owe the entirety of your gift of self to. So that's when you have a lot of freedom in the way that you're experiencing that and applying that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned freedom. You mentioned gratitude as some of these opportunities or some of these advantages of this single state of life, and especially if it's somebody who is kind of in a more prolonged state of life, as opposed to like what I call the Catholic script, where you get married, you meet your spouse in college or shortly after college, and you get married right away. I'm just curious as to what comes to mind in terms of the way that you work with clients and you help them to really see their freedom as gift, or you mentioned gratitude earlier. How do you help them be grateful in this time of singleness when we experience loneliness?
Well, let me ask you this. What
Sure.
do you think? Let's do this. I don't know if this is out of the norm for your podcast here, but what would be an area that you struggle to have that kind of gratitude? Instead of being hypothetical, let me help you look at it a different way, maybe.
Right. Well, I think the areas that I may struggle with more specifically would be just there's those times where, I don't know, Friday night and I don't have anything to do and I'm just kind of alone. I have some roommates that definitely, keep me company and everything, but it's just kind of like, okay, I don't really have anything going on. I guess I'll just kind of watch a movie or something like that. Or just getting into the rabbit hole of social media in those sorts of things. I think those are some of the instances where it'd be like, man, it'd be great to be married right now and just have somebody to spend time with and talk to.
So would you say a feeling of isolation or a feeling of loneliness in that sense?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so I would say, first of all, to look at that part of you that feels a certain feeling, an experience like that, and to rewrite the sort of disposition around it. And I think what most people in any state of life suffer a lot with is self-judgment and self-criticism, underlying a lot of these other things. And so when you look at it and it's like, all right, so part of you feels really lonely, or part of you feels isolated, and that is uncomfortable. And I would say you start off with trying to understand like where that part of you is coming from. So I'd want to listen to that part of you, and you could listen to your own sort of dimension of that feeling within yourself. Or if I was walking with you or working with you, I'd say try to understand that with you, and say like, all right, so you're longing for being with somebody, and I can really understand that. Like, actually, you're made for that, and so you have a spiritual call to that. You have a biological proclivity towards that. If you want to really get into the nuts and bolts, we can start unpacking the way that you are built, with the way testosterone operates in your brain, the way that oxytocin operates in your brain, the way that you have genetic dispositions that have been set up as a blueprint from the moment you were conceived, and in infancy, and in even what's called a juvenile puberty, which is a time before you're 2 years old that you have like 20 times the amount of testosterone surging through your body.
Wow.
Almost the same amount as when you're an adolescent. You have all these brain circuits that are being built, and then you have adolescence that comes up, and then you have like this driving desire to unite and connect with the other sex. And all of these things are being fed, obviously filtered and stamped and imprinted by your transcendent spiritual life. And so you have a sense of objective moral good. I'm not describing you as if you're an animal with only biology, but still we're starting with that biology. It's still a part of who we are. And so it's being redirected, still fueled by the same drive that makes the whole animal kingdom continue year after year through, procreation. And it's reformulated into these beautiful spiritual dimensions of connection and union. And so now it's like, okay, so does it make sense that you're sitting there at Friday night longing to be with an actual woman instead of social media or some game or some TV or absolutely. Like the people that are not close to that sense, it's like they got more work to do because they've got to come back to their regular humanity. Some people like get so tired and they're so critical of that feeling. And for some people, sometimes it leads them to immoral actions. And then they get really hard on themselves and they're like, I got to squelch. I got to repress. I have to make this sense of feeling go away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And we say, how about we don't do that? How about we bless this instead? How about we have gratitude in this space? What that does is it opens up a different way of living with ourself interiorly. And a lot of times what happens is when people are implicitly judging oneself so deeply and criticizing oneself that we sort of have this implicit sense that another person will give me validation and another person will make me feel better. And so it's not just the other person is going to answer the longing of my heart to connect, but actually the other person is going to correct my incorrect self-criticism. And that becomes really important because if you go into a relationship with another person and needing that kind of validation, that's actually a recipe for disaster. Yeah. So this is the time to dig into that, to sit with that, to understand that. And on that Friday night, feeling these feelings, pull out a journal and start writing. Maybe write a love letter to yourself. Maybe actually think about how, like, the blessings that it is to be you and how you are made in the image of God, regardless of who you're married to or not, or your state in life. And there's so many ways that we could start to unpack this and see how we're actually really not stewarding our own selves appropriately. And so when we have on the surface these uncomfortable experiences, there's probably other reasons that are in our control. Because there's, not being with somebody is outside of our control in many ways. And it's easy to sort of write it off. It's like, I'm lonely because I'm not with somebody. And then, okay, well now you're basically, you're in a lot of trouble because what are you going to do about that? There's nothing you can do about that. You're stuck being lonely now. So you could sort of start to open that up a little bit more to say like, all right, what am I actually capable of doing right now? And by starting with self-love and in a validating kind of way, in a stewarding kind of way that is recognizing the glory of God in your own being, that opens up these channels for different kind of gratitude. And then, people that are actually suffering with like maybe a temptation to something that would be immoral, being able to then accept yourself allows you to be mindful, be in that present moment, and turn towards the desires or whatever it is without that judgment, accepting that maybe they're coming from a good place. And when you're able to turn towards things with acceptance, you don't have to avoid them. Most trouble we get into is because of an avoidance tactic on some level. So if we can turn towards things and accept where we are, then it actually opens up a whole different dimension of our creativity, of our strength, of our abilities to see ways out that we wouldn't have seen before, and the motivation to actually carry on to the next best step.
Yeah, that's totally right. It reminds me a little bit of my coach training, and definitely you have a lot of training in the clinical experience of being able to recognize where we are, being able to acknowledge how we're feeling in a particular moment, and to be able to, we talk about it as validate, where it's like, it's okay, it's a natural thing. And you've done that a lot here within this interview of, it's a natural thing that you're experiencing this loneliness. It's actually very, not only biological, but also spiritual as well. It is not good for man to be alone, right? That sort of thing, where we crave this relationship. And I think that you're really drawing out, that's the first step, because it's easy to just think, or give advice of, hey, have you tried this dating app? Or let me set you up with this person. Right. But really it starts with acknowledging where we are right now. I think I've heard you share where a lot of times we don't feel our feelings. Well, we feel the resistance to those feelings because we say in our minds, hey, this loneliness or this isolation that I feel, that's a bad thing. I shouldn't be feeling that. And we actually feel guilty about it. We feel maybe this resistance towards actually having those feelings. And so what you're drawing out here is just recognize that you are, acknowledge that that's happening, and then being able to redirect and ask those questions of, all right, well, where is this coming from? And what do I want to feel? And what am I grateful for now in my life?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Just moving on to just ways that you might be able to help here with our audiences. I think a big thing in this conversation is being able to take ownership over our situations. And that's what we've been talking about, is taking ownership of what we're feeling in our experience, and then being able to do something, whether it's prayer, whether it's journaling about that, and recognizing those sorts of things. And you've been working with developing your mentorship program over the past several years, and I want to talk about that now. Tell us about the new direction that you're taking with the mentorship program, and how that differs from the traditional therapy and counseling model.
Sure. So, I took a step back with the Catholic Psych Institute as the psychology practice that I founded in 2012, and sometime around 2018, I think I kind of hit a wall personally. I kind of felt frustrated with the field, and I was wondering really deeply, like, am I doing the best I can for people that I'm working with? And I knew the people I was working with are really, really good people, really good hearts, really highly motivated. And I know that I'm coming from a place where I'm motivated and I have a good heart, and I'm opening up our work to the Lord, and I'm praying for His intervention. And like I said, I've gotten the training. I put myself through jumping through all the hoops, and I've done everything I could possibly do. Have ongoing supervision. Professional development is really important for me. So I was like, but this is like, why does this feel like something's flat? Like, this is what are we supposed to do here? And I took a step back and just really kind of asked really deeply, is this what God would set up in our world today as a way to help people? It's like, it's all context, right? So like in 2,000 years ago, what was the way God set up to help people? It's like, well, this woman is ashamed of her behavior, and she's promiscuous, and she's had multiple husbands. She can't even go to the well at the same time as the other women. She has to come out in the hot blazing sun. So how would God set up trying to help her? He meets her at the well when she shouldn't even be talking to men, and it would bring shame. And he enters into a space where she is, encountering her in her difficulty, and then walking with her, talking with her, and doing it in an incremental kind of way to draw her out. Another example is the way he just met the guys walking on the road to Emmaus. It's like he just was walking with them. They're walking already. He just shows up where they are. And I just started thinking about, like, is this, here I am in my office, and I've got my office with my chairs and my waiting room, and it's on my schedule. And I'm telling people, oh, you want to come work with me? Okay, here's where you sign up. Then you come on my schedule and my time. Here's my waiting room, and then I'll call you into my office. It just seemed backwards. And so I was like really wrestling with this. At the same time, I actually had my own coach. I had a business coach, because I don't teach business in psychology school, in case anybody's wondering.
Right, yes.
Go start your own business, but we're not going to teach you a thing about business. And so I was like, well, I need help there too. So like I said, professional development all across the board is really important for me. So I had a coach who was talking to me every day. And I was using this app called Voxer, and she was using that. And so if I had a question, I just, from wherever I was, I'm like, whatever, building a website, trying to set up a payment portal, trying to do whatever, and if I'm in there doing it and I'm like building the website or looking at this or looking at that, I could shoot her a message right in the moment of me having an issue. And then within some amount of time, she's just meeting me where I'm at and talking right back to me. So it's like, on one hand, I like hit a wall and took a break. On the other hand, I'm like continuing in the business development side of things with a coach who's actually more invested and involved with me than I ever was in the old model with my own patients from a Catholic anthropology, supposedly. And so it just dawned on me. I was like, what if I could provide the kind of presence and accompaniment to the people who are coming to me for help as my coach is providing to me? And so I went to the drawing board and I started to blueprint out what a new model could actually look like. And I realized walking with people on a daily basis instead of weekly in their own life, in a frame, in a modality that actually meets them where they are instead of making them come to me, making it recorded voice messages. People can like really take time with the communication, listen, reflect, pray, go back and listen again. Instead of that real-time, in-person 45-minute session, there's so much back and forth, half of it people don't even remember afterwards. And it's usually not the things that you talk about in session that you were planning on talking about in session. So it's just very disjointed from the human experience. And so this is what gave birth to our methodology that we call mentorship. The full name is actually Integrated Daily Dialogic Mentorship, IDDM. And this is the way that we are now working with people. And it's so far outside the box of psychotherapy that it's not psychotherapy. It's actually an entirely different thing. It's in some ways, it's not covered in the same way that psychotherapy is. So like you can't get insurance reimbursement, for instance, for the most part. But on the other hand, we also are outside of the parameters of what governs psychotherapy. So we can work with people across state lines. We work with people all over the world. And then we also, most importantly, have the freedom to really own without any duplicity or any embarrassment or any fear of repercussion, the full vision of the human person. And so it's not just like the psychology definition of being spiritual and that's okay. It's like, no, we are created by a creator who we owe a worship to. And also he's actually the agent of change, and he's the primary foundation for any other relationship that we could ever hope to have any sort of flourishing in. So that is what forms and governs and gives direction to any of the work that we're going to ever endeavor to accomplish in helping other people become better people.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and I think you mentioned in there the human experience and how our Lord encountered specifically the Samaritan woman in the example you were using. And just really having that ability to journey with people is different than kind of that compartmentalization in a sense, where whether it's, with the traditional therapy model, where you can kind of compartmentalize that 45-minute or hour long session and just kind of forget and not integrate it into your life. So that's a really cool opportunity that you saw within mentorship and in the direction that you're going here. So it sounds like that there's a couple of directions. I want to give my audience a chance to think about how you might be able to be of value to them within your mentorship program. One, which is them hiring a mentor. And two, I also know I attended one of your webinars that was about, this is how you get training to be a mentor. So could you talk about both of those for our audience and how that could help, especially for Catholic singles?
Yeah, exactly. So we have we have two websites, and so we have sort of our major brand is Catholic Psych, and then this new methodology is called IDDM, like I said. So there's CatholicPsych.com, and then you can always reach us that way, or IDDmentor.com. And that's more specifically for this methodology. And at iddmentor.com, we have a little video. It's called the Town Hall, where I describe what this whole methodology looks like. And so we walk with people whatever state they're in. And we do a lot of work with single people, really embracing this opportunity to work on oneself. It's the best time in some ways to do a lot of this on the front end before you subject a spouse to having to work out the imperfections that we're carrying, which, by the way, you don't work all of it out ever. And so, but there's definitely a difference between sort of like the big, deep stuff that you can get a good handle on before getting married, and then the ongoing continual perfecting that happens in the apprenticeship of marriage once you get started. But secondly to that, we have our whole model of understanding the person. And I do like to make the distinction between the model of the person that we developed and understand and the methodology which arose out of that. And so the model is the way we see the person in the integration of a philosophical anthropology, which is specifically the personalism of John Paul II, and then a spirituality, so bringing in deep spiritual understanding and teachings from our tradition, and the science of psychology. So that's what actually separates us from other modalities out there, was we're actually trained in the science of psychology, and we're passing that on as part of this program as we've developed the full model. So the model is called the Catholic Psych Model of Applied Personalism, the CP MAP. And that model, because of that model, that's what ultimately why I saw this new method as being more effective. So we have a certification where we're training people in the model, the CP MAP. And people wonder if, who would be a good fit for that program. It's for anybody who is bearing the burdens of others in their life, the emotional burdens of others, and spiritual. So we have priests in our certification. We have coaches in our certification. We have licensed therapists in our certification. And then we also have, church, parish directors of evangelization, or youth ministers, or even just moms and dads trying to live out their vocation to family life with a more informed approach. And so, because the model teaches us who we are, how we're made, how we're wounded, and then how we can be healed through accompaniment and relationship with others. Out of that, in the training, when people are going through our certification, we use the methodology of mentorship as a practicum. So we are actually supervising people having clients at some point along the way in our certification. And the way that they're learning the model is by providing the method of mentorship. Some people may never use it again after the fact. If you're a priest, you're probably not going to provide mentorship later. You're providing pastoral ministry, spiritual direction, many other things. The licensed therapists that work with us, they're just using it to inform their practice of psychotherapy. But we do have coaches that are adding this on as a sort of a module or a different way of doing their work. And we have people that are just deciding to start their own mentorship practice. And that way they can bring together these expertise and be able to walk with other people doing it. So we have an open house live. It's about once a quarter. So people can sign up for our next open house at iddmentor.com/open house. And that's where we talk about this training in understanding our model and then how to provide it in whatever methodology people bring to the table.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And I'll be sure to put the show notes. I'll add these links to the show notes so people can check it out and make it accessible for them. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Just a couple of questions as we wrap up here, Dr. Greg. But
Sure
I really appreciate your perspective here, and I know that a lot of people are going to find value out of this episode. And where can our listeners find you and continue to follow you?
CatholicPsych.com. Like I said, Catholic Psych is our overall brand. So anywhere on the social media at Catholic Psych, Instagram, We have a social media team that they're trying to set me up on TikTok. So apparently I'm going to be on TikTok pretty soon. Not anything I know anything about, but
Well, we need a
it
lot
looks
of,
exciting.
as far as what I know from TikTok, I don't TikTok myself, but we need some more Catholic Christian anthropology on there.
Well, this consultant looked at it. He did a search on TikTok for brands that are using it as for like advertising stuff, and there was only one in the entire TikTok world. Was there only one Catholic company using it in that way? I was like, well, this seems like a good opportunity. I mean, I'll follow their direction here.
Yeah. Awesome. So we'll put those in the show notes as well. And then just a question to close. And I use this question in all of my podcast interviews. I like to ask it. I use this phrase, God inspired life. And so I ask the person that I'm interviewing this question, what does it mean to you to live a God inspired life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that it means to look within oneself, to grow in self-awareness, continual self-awareness, to know deeper and deeper what God has planted in the depths of our own hearts, because God has inspired us to become who he sees us as, the best versions of ourselves. He has in mind the saint version of yourself. So you could think about, who's Saint Chad? You know, who does Saint Chad look like? What's your story when it's written about later on after you've gone and you're enjoying the fullness of the beatific vision? What does that whole story look like written out? And for you to get from here to there means your continual deepening of sense of self and your self-awareness that there's something that he has placed at the depths of your heart to discover that. So to be God inspired is to learn with self-awareness what he's put inside of our own heart, and then to respond to that call.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And that goes back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, is kind of a vision for where we're going. We need a telos.
Yes.
We need an end to be moving towards in that whole idea of a future saint self, future Saint Chad in this case, is like, gives us that direction. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Greg. It was really awesome having you on today.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a real blessing.
All right. Everybody take care. Thank you for watching this episode of the 8th Day Coaching Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe on this YouTube channel, and check the description down below for any free offerings that I have, like my ebook on breaking the cycle of pressure in inaction for Catholic singles. Also, feel free to check out our other offerings at 8thdaycoaching.com.